Hey listeners, this is Jay. Got some good news to share. If you're interested in reaching out to fellow professionals or highlighting your product or organization, well, this is for you. We're offering sponsorship opportunities for our future podcast episodes, as well as the upcoming 2025 National Parks and Recreation Association Conference in Orlando. Reach out to us at recklesspod@gmail.com if you're interested. Make sure you follow us on social media to keep up with all the news and updated episodes, and look forward to hearing from you. Hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to Season 4 of RecLess, the podcast expanding your knowledge and making you smarter about the field of parks and recreation. Your hosts are Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country, bringing insights, industry stories, and a surprise guest each episode. Thanks for swinging by. We're glad you're here. This is RecLess.
Ooh, an old school Parks and Rec reference.
Yeah, Jay probably would not understand
No.
What's up, boys?
What's
Hey, Jay.
up?
this. What episode is this?
72, Season 4, Episode 12.
72 412. Okay. All right, you guys ready?
I've never been more ready for something in my whole life.
Jay, you good?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
Hold on a second. I got to pick my teeth.
No, you said you were ready.
I mean,
Go ahead.
you can. Okay. Welcome to RecLess, everyone. We've got a great show ahead of you. This is episode 72, season 4, and episode 12
I got it, guys.
of season 4. Shane is trying to throw us all off now on just about every episode intro. Today, he asked me to hold so that he could pick his teeth.
Important, folks. Teeth health is important.
This is true.
They're the eyes to the
Next-
souls or something. I don't know.
PSA.
Next time I host, I'm just going to mute him until it's time for him to speak.
It's a good idea. Well, I hope you guys are doing good today. I am here as always with Shane Mize and Jay Tryon as we bring you into the world
Hey, Tom.
of parks and recreation. That was a little premature, but hey guys, how are we
I
doing
got
today?
nothing.
Hey, Tom.
Jay, you doing all right?
I'm good, man. I'm happy to be here.
Okay. All right, good. So we've got our guest with us today. It's Mark Brandanowitz. Very, very popular name in the Parks and Rec world. Not the
Never
industry,
heard of him.
the TV show.
Never heard of him.
It's one of the OGs, Parks and Rec season 1 only, I believe.
That's right. Just a Season 1 character.
Season 1 character. So
I liked
did
him as a
not-
character.
I did too. So today we've got another exciting episode ahead of us. And before we get to our guest, I'd like to ask you both a question about taking on a administrative leadership role. So jumping into whatever you consider as your first administrative leadership role, director, deputy director, whatever that may be. And my question for you, going back whenever that was, and for me, I could probably count the assistant director position in Chile, but that was short-lived. I was hired at one position and promoted, and I was in that position for maybe 6 months to a year, and then moved on to the role that I'm in now. So I'm going to focus on this role, which I entered in 12 years ago as director of Parks and Rec. And the question I have for you is, going back then, did you receive a piece of advice from someone that was really helpful for you in transitioning into that role and maybe self-onboarding yourself into that leadership role? And I'll start. I'll give you some time to think about it. I remember when I was brought on here, the previous director of Parks and Recreation was here for roughly 30 years. Steve Fowler, great individual, such a great professional and a mentor of mine. Almost a larger than life presence, obviously, when you've been there for 30 years. I had someone about a year ago tell me, man, we didn't know if you were going to make it. because there was that, that reputation, that aura of what they had put out there. And, that's a challenge at times, the relationships that are built and then trying to jump into those relationships. And so for me, I remember sitting down with the athletic director of our school district, our main school district in the area, Hilton Central School District, and his name is Mike Giaruzzi. We were just having one of those kind of, hey, it's the first couple months. I'm trying to meet with all the stakeholders in the community. We sat down. We have a great partnership with the school district. We use a lot of their facilities. We run a lot of programs in conjunction with the school that they prefer us to run as opposed to them running. So they add a lot to our viability. And we also, we'll give back and have some shared equipment, shared services. They use our facilities as well. Anyway, great relationship. And I'll never forget that time that we sat down, and he, about halfway through, he went over to his bookshelf and he handed me a book, and it was called Entry. And he said, hey, listen, you've got some shoes to fill. There's a lot of great people in this community. He said, but give this a look and get yourself on an entry plan. Have a plan. Be intentional with the individuals that you speak with, how you speak with them, who you choose to meet with, your whole tact of bringing whatever it is that you want to bring from where you came from here, and being mindful of everybody else that was already a part of the community. And that advice was extremely helpful for me. That book was wonderful, taught me a lot again about being really intentional and not necessarily going in, I don't know the best phrase for this, but guns a-blazing and saying, hey, I'm going to change it. I'm going to blaze this trail. I'm going to bring everything that you all didn't have because it's better, as opposed to doing that from day one, sitting back, observing, and really having a plan to integrate my beliefs, my philosophy, and integrate them what they already had in place. So it was really great advice for me to just, I didn't really have an individual the individual that was in place. We didn't really have a lot of time to kind of work together. So it was very new. I was 30 years old, and, I needed a little bit of guidance, and that was that for me. How about you guys?
Yeah, so I was in a little bit of a different scenario. So when you mentioned like first time in a role like that, my first would have been Indian Trail. And we've talked a little bit about Indian Trail on the pod before, but the unique part for me was I was their very first park and rec hire. So there wasn't anyone else in the town that was a park and rec employee that had park and rec experience that, I could gain advice from or gain any sort of insight from, since I was hired literally to help build the department from scratch. But the first thing that did come to my mind when you asked the question, from advice going towards a leadership role, was a conversation I had with Jim Garges, who at the time was the director for Mecklenburg County. And I was in his office, and I vividly remember the conversation because I was very happy with where I was with Mecklenburg County and the role I was in. I had had a couple previous promotions and was gaining responsibility and really just wanted to take on a bigger role. So I was having a conversation with Jim, and Jim said to me, looked me in the eye, and ultimately said, in order for you to grow and become the leader that you want to be, that I can see you being, you're going to have to leave the department. And I had so much respect for him for saying that, because I don't know how many directors would say that to someone, because then you ultimately know you're probably going to lose them. And everyone may look at that and say, well, he's doing a great thing for you, and which is why I appreciated it and I really respected it. But ultimately, he did know that, it's going to be a matter of time before I leave. And when I've looked back at that conversation, I've had similar conversations with staff that have worked for me or worked for other departments that I've been in. And I've kind of seen it and known that, like, okay, you might have reached your peak in our department. And I've always wanted to kind of have that same mentality of, if you want to be the best you can be, you may need to leave, because you've done great things here. I know you want to be a stronger leader at a different role, whether it's director, assistant director, deputy, whatever it may be. So I know it's a little bit different than what the question was, but that's just a piece of advice that I received that, really stuck with me. And I think it's really important, so that you are there as someone your staff sees and understands the big picture. Because, and when I say big picture, obviously, like, the big picture can be so many different things, from like what we're doing as an impact and how you're providing services for your community, but like knowing what that individual's goals are, you're going to see the big picture of what their opportunities and what their platform could be if you allow them to fly.
Well, when you mentioned that, I almost instantly thought of two different people that said something that I've tried to wrap, into my momentum to take these steps forward that I've taken. And so I was a rec superintendent in Missouri City, 7 years, was in front of council, spoke to Parks Commission, did all the things that a director would do, especially at some smaller agencies. But I remember telling Jim Brown, who's Kevin Brown, for those that are in our industry now, Kevin Brown's father. Jim was a longtime park and rec professional, did some amazing work in Texas. And I remember telling him I didn't think I could be a director. And so because I didn't think I could be a director, I didn't want to do director things. I didn't want to act like a director. I didn't want to dress like a director. I didn't want to project like a director, go to director, the Gulf Coast directors meetings. I didn't want to do those things. And I remember him asking me one day, just point blank, saying, "You don't even know what a director is. You're basing everything off of what you think I do, what you think we do, how you think we dress. Like, sure, you dress up at a council meeting, right? But I'm not always dressed up on a Tuesday. I'm not, sure, I'm in front of, and there are things that I have learned, and I think we've all learned being a director. It absolutely sucked. There are things that we would all do that we'd probably do for free, and there are things that we do because the agency has to pay me to deal with budget and to go to council meetings and some of those things, because I don't like speaking in front of people. I don't like policy and procedure. And so some of that stuff, I earn my salary on. And there's some things, wondering about a special event or leading a group of people that love Parks and Rec, I would do that for free. Earmuffs, Pflugerville leadership, but I would do that for free. You know what I mean? Like, I really would do some of that regardless. And so, yeah, I was projecting what I thought a director would be and limiting. And he was saying, you're going to limit not only your career, but your family's earning potential. Like, at that time, I had 4 young kids. My wife was a school teacher. It's like, you could be making a lot more money, and you're choosing not to because you're afraid of what this job might or might not be. You're afraid of what you might or might not have to be in or look like or project. And so that was really interesting. And then Jason Mangum came in as my director in Missouri City, and he said it to me, but it was just kind of a cautionary tale, I think, to anyone. And he got his first director job, and he went in wanting to make changes, like we all do, especially in an agency where you're new to, right? You come in and you're replacing that person. And he said he made the poor assumption that they hadn't done some of those things because they didn't want to. And you come in and like, oh, you're not Capra, or you're not gold medal, or you're not doing this incredible after school program, or whatever it is. And so you come in and your first week, you're talking about all these things you're going to do. First of all, you've replaced a director. One person's left and you've stepped in, and your philosophy may change, your leadership style may change, your direction may change. You may set a goalpost, but there's a lot of people that either bought into that previous thing, or maybe they didn't, but they were trying hard to do really good work in Parks and Rec, and you're already marginalizing it because you, from the outside, have just come in and said it doesn't reach a level that you think it should reach. And so you're losing your new staff immediately. You're disenfranchising that whole group because you're coming in saying, we need to do this, this, and this, and you haven't even evaluated what they are doing. Why haven't they hit these quote unquote marks that you've just put in front of them, these arbitrary marks that you've put in front of them? Maybe they've been trying to do it. Maybe they've needed a next step or more budget or staff or et cetera. And so, don't come in immediately and start trying to square a circle until you understand why it is what it is. And so I've tried to use both of those. That I don't know what the director of Pflugerville looks like until I apply and got it. I don't know what my next director job is going to look like until I apply and get it. And when I get to that spot, don't assume they haven't reached this level of greatness that I'm perceiving because they didn't want to. There could be a lot of other reasons that they haven't, and just going in and making the assumption that they didn't because they didn't want to, you can lose a lot of staff immediately. The momentum of a new hire coming in and a fresh face could be going from a positive to a negative real quick.
I really appreciate what you both said. You hit on some really, really great points, and we didn't talk too much on this, but also not trying to be the person who was in the chair before you too. And I know we've talked about that on this show before. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this topic with our guest. So let's get into it. I got some clues for you here. We'll see. Test out some of your park and rec professional
So
knowledge.
Jay, Mark Brandanowicz was the planner in Pawnee, Indiana for season 1 of Parks and Rec.
Okay. Thank you for the insight.
I don't know that he was the city
Okay.
planner.
I think he was.
I think there were. Okay, well, if I say what I'm going to say, it might throw us off. Our guest has, in the middle of a 25-year career, most of it with one agency. Our guest has worked for public park agencies at all levels, so federal, state, county, and local, including working for the National Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, New Jersey Forestry, and Park Service, as well as other agencies. Although they do not have a degree in planning, little clue there on Mark Brandanowicz, they do not have a degree in planning, design, or construction. They spent most of their parks and recreation career in those areas of our field. They have presented at multiple NRPA conferences, an NRPA Innovation Lab, state conferences, and other industry-adjacent conferences like real estate, economic development, design, and planning. Our guest is very active in NRPA's Urban Leaders Committee with a prior guest, Haley Herzing, and is an active member of the City Park Alliance. The guest is a new regent for Revenue Development and Management School, and their current agency is in charge of the arts and gives out over $2 million annually in grants to local art organizations. Anything?
No.
Okay. This is going to be narrowing it down a little bit. Our guest is a proud Michigan State Spartan.
Okay.
I have an idea.
All right.
Do we live in the same state?
Our guest does live in the state of North Carolina. And we did think after having our conversation that you might have an idea with the Michigan State Spartan reference. Also, now knowing and seeing that Mark Brandanowicz is a planner, and you probably know a little bit about our guests. Our guest today, please welcome Stephen Bentley, Director, City of Raleigh, Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources.
Hello.
Hey, Stephen.
What's up, guys?
My man. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing good. Happy to be here. I told Tom I listened to the show. I listened to all of season 1. I don't know how many shows you had, but in season 1, I replaced all the shrubs and flowers in front of my house. So if it was like 20 episodes, I guess it took like 20 hours to do it. So I would listen to a couple episodes. I'm like, dang, I've been working 2 hours. Take a break.
Nice. That's great.
Yes. Stephen, obviously knowing our show and our format and being an avid listener, did a really, really good job of helping provide those clues. He had ideas, right, that Jay may guess a little bit based on some of what we shared. So did a great job of keeping it to a place where that did not happen. And Stephen, your city of Raleigh that you're with right now is really booming, right? There are people moving into the area. It's one of the most, I would say, probably highly moved to areas, just like Austin, right? Mm-hmm. So some similarities there with Austin and Raleigh. I want to continue on. I want to let our listeners learn a little bit about you, Stephen, because we've known each other for a while, going back to the Agents of Change group, which I remember actually we were in Austin one of those years. So tying back to Austin, but I learned so much about you a couple of days ago when we did kind of our pre-show check-in, and you've got a lot going on and you have a fascinating career. So going back to our initial question, it was about advice. And Stephen and I had touched base after the national conference 2 years ago. And just in kind of casual conversation over email, Stephen shared this really great story. Before I get into this, you've been the director for how long?
About 3 years.
About 3 years. So it's somewhat recent, especially considering you spent the majority of your 25-year career with Raleigh.
Yeah.
And in those emails, Stephen sent this amazing piece of advice and this really, really insightful way of really diving in and self-onboarding. And that was spending time on a weekly basis, trying to get to know all of the staff, talking to them, asking them what they do, what they want to do. And that stuck with me, and to a point where I actually asked Stephen if I could use that in presentations, right? It's just such a great thought for individuals who are going and doing that. For someone who's been there for 25 years, though, right? You probably didn't have to. You have a lot of knowledge about your agency, but a lot of you had mentioned in that email that especially the recreation and programming side of things, because where you came from, your majority of your background was in the park and planning side of it.
Yeah.
So can you just tell the audience the story of your kind of career trajectory? It really is fascinating. You've spent a lot of time in parks, and you also shared to me that you went into the finance aspect of things at one point or another too. So share your story and how you got into the position you are currently.
Well, thanks again, guys. I enjoy listening to you all on a periodic basis. I didn't go to college for Parks and Rec, but I stumbled into it like a lot of us did. I was going to be a athletic trainer. I had to take a ton of like human anatomy classes. I was like, nope, I am not doing that. And I took a leadership course, and the leadership course was in recreation and leisure services management. And boom, I was like, I found my people. And then every summer after that, I did a Parks and Rec job. So I worked at a high and low ropes course. I did a little work on the Appalachian Trail. I worked for the New Jersey Forest Service. I was done with college, went to graduate school at Michigan State, go green. And that's where I worked for the U.S. Forest Service, which paid for like my TA or RA research assistant, and did my master's work on like community engagement and how citizens participate in a career. And man, they used the mitt. I know this isn't a video one, but I was up near Traverse City, and I was like, I need to get someplace where it's a little bit warmer, a little bit more urban too, because what I discovered through state work and national work, I wasn't seeing the impact of my work. And I was like, I want to be able to see how, I mean, you do see it, but not at the scale that all of the work that we're doing. So took a leap of faith, moved to Raleigh, and I took a park operations job with Wake County Parks and Open Space. Did everything from lots of mowing grass, educational programs, small construction projects. And I was looking to get someplace in like an administrative job. And I took a leap of faith for a park planner. I was an entry-level park planner. It was called a planning tech. And this was in '05. So my 20th year in Raleigh will be in December. And then I just grinded it out. I told Tom, I took all the projects no one wanted. So I looked at the history and how we would manage our cemeteries better and restore our cemeteries. I took on the environmental folks and helped create policy for nature preserves and create our own nature preserves. And one of the toughest jobs I took on as a young project manager is building our first senior centers. We call them, active adult centers. And I remember our first couple of meetings, I was in my 30s, and the World War II veterans like, what do you know about me? You don't know nothing about my generation. So really it was relationships, sitting down and understanding is I want to build the best center to cater to your needs. And I have relationships. This was probably in the teens. I still get Christmas cards, emails from individuals that I participated in. And then I had gotten to be a supervisor doing capital projects. And I told our director at the time, I want to oversee the capital budget. And she's like, sure, it's a pain in the butt. Everybody's going to try to beat you up for money and give you the guilt trip on why they need this fixed and that fixed. And so I developed a series of criteria and matrix for prioritizing our projects. And then she's like, you need to join the city committee for doing this. And I did. And I became a loudmouth. I was just like, hey, I don't know why you're doing it this way, to the budget staff and the finance staff. And one day the budget director is like, can I take you for coffee? And I'm like, oh shit, she's off. And it was just the opposite. She's like, I want you to come work for me. And she's like, I know you're a Parks and Rec guy. You've been in it for 10 years. People like you. You have a good trajectory. She's like, but I can show you how a city is run. Best thing I ever did with my career. Next thing you know, I'm managing the entire capital budget for the city, which is like a $500 million. You're sitting at the table with the city manager, council members. I knew where all the money was socked away in different funds, but it was a huge learning curve because Parks and Rec guy, I didn't know how we issue debt, how cash rollouts occur. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And then we bought a huge park, or not park, it is a park now. We bought a huge property downtown Raleigh. We basically bought 308 acres. We bought the old state mental hospital called Dix Park. It's 308 acres, overlooks downtown, probably the most valuable real estate that was left in downtown Raleigh. And the city manager and the director said, "We will create a job for you. We want you to manage this. You'll be working directly with the mayor, city attorney, and the city manager's office." And I had a really great director at the time, Diane Sauer. She's like, "You do you. I'll give you this opportunity." And she's like, eventually, we'll have an AD job open up or something like that. So that was in 2015, and I became an assistant director in like 2018. And then I was promoted to director in 2022. So zigged and zagged, but that work in the budget office was invaluable. Still, it is today. We haven't changed a ton, but I'm able to sit at the table with the finance and budget director, and we're talking numbers. I understand what they're trying to do, and then try to share to my staff, hey, learn this, because when you're at the table, you're either being eaten or you're part of that. You're yourself. So
You must have a huge respect for people that go through imposter syndrome, because you have definitely jumped into a lot of
yes,
deep ends of pools, that where you've had to kind of just
absolutely.
survive there for a while. When you said you were a planner, I thought, man, I tell people all the time, I love Parks and Rec, but you wouldn't want me to design your park, because it would be like that Netflix documentary, like, class action lawsuit park or whatever it was, because I would have, I'd have no safety concerns, all the parameters that a planner should know. I wouldn't know those things. But it sounded like you stayed more on the process, procedure, even the program side, like managing the projects, not so much knowing the fallout zone or whatever. But I'm sure there were times that you needed to know those things as well. Like, how did you build that muscle up? Because that's not something we talk all the time, that you can get into this industry without the education side, as long as you care on your people and you care for your community. But there are some things in our industry, specifically, planning, where you do have to know about fallout zones, and you have to know some safety things that you don't necessarily have to know when you're putting on a special event. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question, Shane. One of the things I've always thought about is I'm not going to be an expert in anything, but
Yeah.
I'm going to learn a lot of stuff. There's a book, David Epstein wrote it, Range. It's like how generalists triumph the world.
Oh.
Like, you're always taught, like in baseball, you got to start young, stay with one sport. And his philosophy was learn a lot about a lot of things. And when I was in that role, I would tell the consultant working for me, "I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, but I can pull in our maintenance staff. I'm going to rely on you. I'm going to bring good ideas, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions." And it's not that I'm trying to challenge you. I'm trying to learn, because I'm representing the recreation supervisor, the park maintenance person,
The
and
inline manager of it all.
yeah, I was so basically being a good project manager. It's funny, designers are quirky. I went to a design studio in Boston, and I won't say the firm's name. Everybody was a graduate of Harvard. And they're based like right around the corner from Harvard. And they were like, "Well, are you a graduate of Harvard?" And I was like, "No, I hire graduates from Harvard." And,
Right.
and it is our project manager, from that firm. So it was one of those things where I knew in that role, I mean, I don't know how air conditioning systems work perfectly, but I pull in our facility and operations staff. So knowing what I don't know, huge important. And then that gets to what Tom was talking about when I got this role. I don't know how to run an aquatic center or summer camp. I was a park operations and a project manager. So I spent every 2 weeks on Thursday, my first year, for 3 hours. And I went to summer camp. I went to aquatics. I went to basketball tournaments, baseball tournaments, and they were planned. They weren't pop up. I would just transparent. I went to every community center, which we have 40 of them, and just met staff. And a lot of them were like, "You've been with the department 20 years. How come I never met you?" And then I would explain I was on a completely different side of the department. And that's why I was there to meet with them.
In those moments, was it tough to only observe? Like, if you see something that maybe you don't completely understand why they're doing that, or did you just say, "This is what happens if I'm here or not, I'm just going to observe"? And then if you think there was actually coaching or something that needs to be corrected, you could follow up afterwards.
Both. So one, it was hard to observe. One was we had gone through multiple directors in like a 4-year period during COVID. So part of it was I heard feedback. I don't even know anything about the director. I never see them. So one, it was FaceTime. There was people like, I just want to know you and your background. Then the other was for me to learn. And then my business manager hates it. I come back and I'm like, guess what I want to spend money on? So some of it is hearing, big organizations, things get filtered. It's that little exercise you do in camp where you say something and by the time an apple becomes an orange at the end.
Yeah, telephone.
And then I would talk to my ADs and they'd be like, how did you know that? And I'd be like, spend time with your staff, right? And I don't do it to be like, aha. Some of it is I want to infuse innovation, and because I control budget and strategy and direction, sometimes they'd be like, that's a good idea. Be patient. I'm going to figure out how to way that we're going to work on that maybe next year, or let's do it now.
You don't know who the gatekeepers are until you get out there, who's vanguarding and preventing things from filtering up. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. We've talked about it before, but I what you just said in multiple ways of not, there are people out there who probably feel that imposter syndrome gets them when you're in a position where I don't know how the vent track works. I don't know how the ball field groomer works or whatever it is. Right. And I talked to someone the other day that their management style was, well, how can I go out there and tell them what to do when I don't know what it's like to do their job? And I get that, but I also disagree, right? In our role, and you said it really, really well, Stephen, is that we listen to them and you put them in a position to get them what they need.
Yeah.
To foster the innovation, whatever that may be, to get the job done.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I mean, you mentioned the arts. I mean, last Thursday, one of my visits was to our art studio, and we procure like 30,000 pounds of clay. I learned so much about clay. I went home. My wife was just like, you got to shut up about the clay. We have, we allow people to use settling torches, and we have a room. It's called the hammer room, and it's soundproof because they make jewelry. And I was like, what's that room? They're like, oh, that's the hammer room. It's got all these hammers on it. And I was like, well, what the hell are we doing here? So, but learning all those things, and most of the staff that work in our art centers are living artists. So if they're not working at the center at night, they're creating art and selling it and so forth. So yeah, I wave the flag of stupidity quite a bit.
Well, Stephen, I want to actually stay on that topic of art, and I don't know.
Oh, I thought you were going to stay on the topic of stupidity.
I was like, wait a minute.
I don't know who Mark
That's our wheelhouse.
is.
We are comfortable.
Oh, man. So, I don't know if you know this, but we sent some staff from our department to your department a few months back, and I think we might have talked about it, to visit your art studios and to visit your pottery studios and ceramic studios, and you hear the fact that you mentioned with how many facilities you have and all the different publications you've had with public art. And I know we've had previous conversations too on your program that provides 1% of all projects to public art.
Yeah.
I'm curious because we're going through a big boom here with our public art committee, and we have an art center. How did that get started? And was that something that was generally fought for by the community or by elected officials or by staff?
It was a combination of the art community, creative community, and then a really bold mayor who loved art.
Okay.
You know what? We're a high growth city. It started with 0.5%, and it's only construction, so soft costs aren't included. And then they started seeing like really quality integrated art. So it's not like plop art. We hire the artist the same time we hire the design team. And if it's a construction management delivered, same time we hire the construction manager. So the artist is part of it. It is getting other departments to buy in. We asked roadways, stormwater, water and sewer are exempt because they're their own enterprise, but every other fire stations, our operations centers, all of them have to contribute as we build out. And there was some kicking and screaming for like several years. But now there's this weird appreciation. I remember going to one of our operations center. I was like, do you like working here? He's like, I like the giant bolt that's out there. And I was like, that's a piece of artwork. And the guy was like, no way, man. I just thought it was a giant bolt, So like those type of moments. But yeah, it was a little bit of a struggle, boss.
This might be more of a quick hitter question in our rapid fire, but I'm just going to ask it now since we're on the arts. Shane, where were we where you took a photo? I don't know if it was willingly or not, but with the butterfly, and you had the butterfly wings.
Nashville.
So a lot of these cities that are, I guess as advanced as maybe yours is with the arts and the culture, they have that landmark, that piece
Yeah.
that people visit to take a photo with or whatever. Do you have one or two that you could share? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we got multiple.
Okay.
Murals, we have a ton of murals across our city. So we have a huge music festival called Dreamville, and it's led by J. Cole, who was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. When I'd say big, it's 53,000 people a day, and
Wow.
it's in one of our parks. And a mural of him and some of the legendary hip hop artists is like a go-to stop. And then the project I talked about where we bought Dick's Park, we have right now something called a tune, and it's an artist out of New Hampshire who has these giant tubes that you can stand in and crawl on, and
That's cool.
they're like crazy Instagram opportunities. So there's a handful of them.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and let's maybe take that opportunity to transition and talk about the Dorothea Dix Park. Or so it was. You explained it to me, and it is very interesting. It's fascinating, and so it's in downtown,
Yep.
and it was an old mental health hospital
Yeah.
facility and complex. And if I'm getting this correct from my notes, 1 million square feet of buildings
Yeah.
that's on the property already.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
clearly you obviously you got to figure out what to do with that. You told me a couple. Obviously, you might use some, not use some.
Yep.
So tell me about that project. That's a project that I don't know a lot of people will be able to be a part of, and it's pretty fascinating, and it's also a really big opportunity for the community. What's some of the background, and what are the intentions for it?
Former mayor, just bold vision. Business leaders from across the region, some of our top executives were like, we need an iconic park in our downtown. It's good for economic development. 50 years, and we're talking about people on both sides of the aisle. Even the furthest right people in the world were like, this is good for business. We negotiated a sales price, which even I was involved in. I worked on an appraisal, the survey. I like set the boundaries. I did all this environmental analysis when I had that role. But we bought the property for $52 million in 2015. Then we leased the property back to the state. The state has 2,000 employees on the campus. And over time, we just did activations. One is we planted 6 acres of sunflowers. When they bloom in that 1 week, we get 150,000 people come look at these sunflowers. So public art, we did an amazing master plan with a design firm out of New York called Michael Van Valkenburg Associates, maybe the most renowned landscape architect
Yeah.
in the world. They've done stuff in Austin. I mean, they're everything you pay for. They're
They're
really
well known. Yeah.
they are very, very well known, which elevated the thinking of what an urban park would be. We have great parks in Raleigh, but this park is so far beyond anything we think it is going to be, is really amazing. Now, we couldn't do it alone. So the group of political leaders and business leaders created a conservancy. They now have 7 members. They've raised $75 million in the first 10 years. And the first phase of the project out of the 308 acres is 20 acres. And that first phase is $75 million. And 1/3 of that is being paid for by private donors. It opens up in a week. There will be no public space like this in the Southeast United States. It is the most over-the-top play structures that were built in Germany, interactive waterfalls, a beautiful Grand Plaza. And what we are framing it as, this is a park for the capital, the park for Central North Carolina. It's not just Raleigh, because when people come, we have free museums in Raleigh. So you can go to the Science Museum, Art Museum, History Museum free.
Yeah.
Our goal is, as a student, if you come from where Jay lives or wherever, and you go to the museums, you also go to that park. So we want to have almost like a paid experience, but it will be for free. But with that, it comes a lot of baggage. Working with a conservancy isn't easy. If someone gave us $10 million, I'm going to take that person's call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And just understanding that there's a little bit of push-pull. They are raising funds, so they are part of the decision-making process. And then in my own department is the haves and have-nots. You're spending $75 million over there, Stephen. I've been asking for my roof for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's managing those dynamics in the community. A community member is saying, why are you spending so much money on this park over at Dorothea Dix, when the tennis court sand or the sand in the volleyball courts at such and such park needs to be replaced. So it can be grand, but it also is can be pretty heavy when you're talking to community members.
That's fascinating. I mean, we next year our country will be 250 years old. You know, and it's
Yeah.
in some cities, Pflugerville's 60 years old, right? And some cities are 250 years old or older. You know, some cities predate obviously our Declaration of Independence in some ways. But what's interesting about us versus Europe or, you know, some other continents is we have facilities. You're starting to see people have an interest in revitalizing, right?
Yeah.
Churches, schools. I deep dive on stupid shit on YouTube all the time. Hashtag you're Rooney. But like there was a prison that someone turned into an apartment complex, you know?
Yeah.
And so you're starting to see these 60, 70, 80-year-old buildings, you know, that are seeing their second life. And that sounds like what you did there.
Yeah.
The rub with that though is at some point anyone had the opportunity to purchase that space. I'd imagine if anybody would have had the collateral of 50 something million, they could have purchased it, right? But 50 million is the initial investment. It's now 75 million for 2/3. And so in some ways it makes that where a really wealthy developer or government are the only two people that can envision that. And government needs help, right? The government needs the private sector to do the public-private partnership side of it, to do the fundraising, because no one wants to give to the city of, but they'd love to give to the conservancy of,
Right.
you know? And so I was fascinated by what I've seen. So we've pursued the Trail Capital of Texas designation in our state. And as soon as we got it, it allowed me to leverage funds for trails. And I get $1 million a year to do trail improvements. And I have 350,000 in trail maintenance every year. So I have 1.5 million I can pour into trails. That's a great thing. It also allows every single person to say, well, you say you're the Trail Capital of Texas and this has got a crack in it. You say you're the Trail Capital of Texas and there's weeds over here, you know? And so it's that same push and pull, right? Like you want to put 125 million into this park between purchase and implementation. Meanwhile, we've got kids that are playing outside, or we've got this backstop that's broken or whatever. And so how do you get your city leadership to understand that the least of us is just as important as the most of us? Like this may on a grand scale only serve this community, may only serve 5 or 6 families or this summer camp or this softball team, this backstop. But we have to also continue to invest in it. How do we make sure that we're not just regressing to one service population versus the other?
That's a really great question. I have a new boss, a new assistant city manager, and we've known each other before he took this role. And he asked me that same question the other day. And I say this to our elected officials: we would have never bought Dix Park unless we had a good park system, if not a great park system.
Yeah.
Meaning the culture of Raleigh was planned. You throw back to when it was planned. We were planned around 5 parks, and then the capital being right in the center. So like parks are in our DNA. The tolerance here for investment in parks is pretty high. 2000, 2003, 2007, 2014, and 2022 all had referendums, all passed around 70%. Our last one in 2022 is for 275 million, and that passed at 70%. So there's this high tolerance where people, but it is getting back to that smaller park. What we're trying to let people know is that our commitment to a good system is number one. And by having public-private partnership, I like to say public-private partnership and philanthropy, so P4, that's the way we're going to deliver on a project that's bigger than most.
So this is the cherry on top of your park system, not the golden Band-Aid that fixes your park system.
That's exactly it. And as I said earlier, we're trying to create like a paid experience feel, but it'll be for free. What we are grappling now is I have 1 million square feet in my park system. This campus has 1 million square feet of old buildings that date back to the 1850s, all the way up to, I think, 1965. We're planning to demo about 500,000 square feet of those. But our first project with the Conservancy was a chapel built in 1955 called Always Chapel. People love to go, and we kind of just stripped it down, put air conditioning on it, event space, staff space. So we've been highly intentional. We took some of the older stone structures that date back probably 75, 80 years, renovated those. So with the conservancy money and city money, we made very, very tactical improvements that people were like, oh, I can see where you're going with this. The big gorilla is the hospital complex. Just one of those things that you, like I said, you do a deep dive and learn about a lot of things. I went into a deep dive when I took that project on mental health and what it means to North Carolina and what each movement over time in mental health and how we treated patients was fascinating. So like honoring mental health, the hospital was built through with slave labor. So
Wow.
we're recognizing that this, and before that, it was a plantation in the 1700s. So over this park or this landscape's history, we're grappling with probably every social issue there is, but we're trying to put that at the forefront of it's now a healing place. It's now a park where anybody can go. It's a park where we can go, and it has a cemetery on it, a pauper cemetery, which we know 3/4 of the names of the people, some we don't. And by the way, a portion of the property is the old city landfill. So everything the city didn't want to like have downtown, they put in this corner of town, and we're building a park out of it.
Wow.
Well, and I can speak for it because I've been there and it's amazing. So I'm on your website, Stephen, and when I was last there, it was probably 2 years ago.
Okay.
Obviously, the Play Plaza was not there, and it's opening up soon according to the website. So I'm definitely needing to get back there and check that out because I remember talking to you when you were planning that and just seeing the innovation, light bulb go off in your head of what's going to be there. Sounded incredible, and now that as I see new pictures, it definitely warrants a trip back to the park.
Yeah, it's something that people will travel to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to kind of change direction a little bit, and Tom mentioned it during the intro about you becoming a regent for revenue management school, and you and I actually, I think, really first met at director school, and that's where we got connected and have stayed in touch ever since then. And I've seen you speak, and you've obviously spoken at a ton of different conferences, and I've always enjoyed hearing you speak. And I'm curious, what drew you to want to become a regent for revenue school?
I thought about the schools throughout my career, and the last couple of years, I'm like, I want to get my feet underneath me in this role as the director.
Yeah.
Moving into it I'm in my third year now. I started, like anything I started doing my due diligence. So I talked to Matt. I talked to a few of your other guests, and I was like, what school, you know me and what my passions are. And the one thing that I wanted to focus on because of my prior experience in the budget and finance work was how can I bring that work to the revenue school? We've also had a few friends groups and other kind of conservancy adjacent type partnerships pop up the last few years. So really being in the midst of taking Raleigh and moving it in a little bit different direction. I think I can share that. I'm not going to be an expert in all these things. I talked to Ryan, one of your former guests. So I called folks and I was like, here are my interests. Is this the right school for me? And just honestly, I was like, it's the right time. And so I threw my hat in the ring.
That's cool.
I think we've always heard leaders are readers, but as YouTube and podcasts and other platforms have grown, I think some people supplement reading with other, blogs, etc. How do you professionally develop yourself as a leader? Do you continue to read? I know you've already referenced at least one book, or do you balance that between a couple different things? Are you heavy into a blog or a podcast or something else when you're not gardening, for example?
Gardening is how I decouple my stress. I don't read a lot of books. I'll be very honest. My favorite magazines are Garden and Gun. I'm a hunter and I love to cook and I live in the South, so you got to like that magazine. I would say how do I develop my leadership skills is probably through relationships. I have a couple of people that I see as mentors. I have 3 standard calls a month. One is with Lisa Paradis, one is with Al Bangora, and one is breakfast with a guy named Mickey Fern, who is a long time, 50-year career in Parks and Recreation. So I would say it's talking through with others the way I'm feeling. If I'm feeling some type of way about something and I need to work through it, I will text someone and be like, can you join a call? I mean, I will read trade magazines, and I do follow like adjacencies, like some planning sites, ULI, Urban Land Institute. So I don't get a core of what I do from the parks and recreation industry. I try to find industries that are part of our world.
Yeah.
And I know Tom referenced it. The last couple of years, I've really jumped into supporting and presenting and attending the City Park Alliance. Raleigh being a trajectory city, we have like 70 people move here a day. I think we're third. I think we're right behind Austin
Yeah.
in like metro growth area. And the City Park Alliance and NRPA, obviously. I will reach out to other directors and talk through. I'll see what they're doing. I case study, constantly always steal everything. Like I will call them like, hey, you're doing this. Can you talk me through how to do it? So Shane, I'd say 85% of my leadership development is through the relationships that I've sought out.
And I bet City Park Alliance is interesting. I know Tom wanted to jump in, but just an observation more than anything. There is a delineating line somewhere with large cities where they aren't park and rec professionals. They're, you know what I mean? Like we had Joe Turner on. He had done some stuff for some county work, but he was a franchisee for Burger King for a long time. And so when you look at the director in New York and Boston and now you see some large cities, Austin, Seattle, others might have someone, although currently Jesus is in Austin and he was a superintendent or assistant superintendent of the Board of Education in DC, which is how he got into DC parks and how he got into Seattle parks. And so some of them stay here, but I think of our large cities, some of them are guys that have grown up through that agency or another agency. And some of them like Homer out in San Antonio I think he was an education person, but I think it was like even academic side. It was university based. And so when you are dealing with some folks at this urban size cities, you might be dealing with someone that's not a park and rec professional, but now they are, right? Their background isn't even, your background was very diverse in our field, but it wasn't the former director of finance. And then they've come into, the parks department, or they were the chief of staff for a mayor. Now they're the parks department, or I think AP Diaz was a lawyer before he got into something in our park side. So do you find those people to still be just fully zealots of Parks and Rec, and that's how they ultimately landed in that spot? Or are they becoming fans of it as they're doing it?
That's it. I think like us, some of them stumbled into it. They're just, they see the value, the contributions to economics, health and wellness, art and creativity. And they're like, dang, I might have been an attorney before, but and then they'll take their lens of negotiation and so forth and kind of apply it through it. You mentioned New York City, the former New York City Parks Commissioner, Mitchell Silver, was our planning director. Now he's one of my city councilmen. Make a pitch about a park project to the former New York City Park Commissioner can be a heavy lift.
Yeah.
But yeah, I talk about when I became director, we had a 20% vacancy rate. That equates to about 100 people. And so I went through to supervisors and I was like, and I've heard you all talk about this. I do believe it's true. We're struggling from an education standpoint for park and rec degrees. So where do we find people that want to do the work that might be a teacher, that might be a social worker? And so I was trying to adjust the recruitment philosophy. I'm like, just find good people with good values that we can put in a position. Then they'll take that twist as a teacher or a social worker, and they'll advance the values of the department or the programming in the department. Because if you think about our field, it is so interdisciplinary. Coach, recreation, there's all these different facets of people's background. So I probably attract to that when I'm at other directors. I might be a little bit fascinated, and I'll ask them, I read about your background. Can you tell me about it and how they got there?
We're gonna shift over into our rapid fire after one more question I have for you, because I really enjoyed our conversation the other day, and it ties really well into what we had just talked about. You had mentioned kind of that leadership learning comes from relationships, right? And I want to say, without putting words in your mouth, but it really resonates from what you've said earlier. Some of that leadership learning also comes from the individuals that you put in positions to be experts, right? Like you said it about 4 or 5 times today, that I learned about clay, or I learned about this, right? And I can resonate and relate to that so well. When I'm talking to our foremans, and they're telling me about what goes into the systems, right? The water systems when we're getting ready to put in a splash pad, and we're talking about these backflow devices, and I'm constantly learning about this, right? Because it's going back and forth, and I have questions. I just want to know, and so that also sounds like a big part of your leadership learning is really just leaning on those experts, which is so important. And Shane, my question ties into something you said earlier in the initial question, which was when you take a position, there's also maybe some goals that we have that don't always get done, and you make an assumption of why they didn't get done. Mm-hmm. And Stephen, you told me a story that Raleigh is a very successful department. In fact, several gold medals, okay, and over time.
Yeah.
But you're now getting your accreditation.
Yeah.
Your CAPR accreditation for the first time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In Raleigh. Yeah. And you had told me you got close when you were working in other positions, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't happen. So tell us about the process. You've been there for 20 something years. You've seen that, you've gone through it. Why now?
Shout out to one of your former guests. I listen to people that I don't know most of the time, but I listen to Kathy Capps. I worked with Kathy Capps for a number of years. She was a huge champion of accreditation. And I remember being like, why are we going to do this? And then we talked about it. I was like, we should do it. We went through auditing our department twice and never applied. I started noticing a number of our staff becoming more involved as visitors, getting their CPRP, and then be flat out honest with you, I'm the capital city of North Carolina, and we are not an accredited agency. And I'm like, we will be accredited. Our city manager and I talked about it a number of times. She really pushed our police department to become nationally accredited, our water department to become nationally accredited. And I went to our leadership team. I was like, we're going to do this. We're all going to get behind it. It's going to be in everybody's kind of work plans and so forth. And there was some inertia. There are some people just like, yeah, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. But we made it fun. We met a lot in like a social way, not like checking every box. And then we started seeing people get behind it and people saying, oh, now I see why we're doing it. Because now I can point to that it's this person's job to do it versus when I say, hey, who's responsible for, I don't know, refunds? They'll be like, well, sometimes John, sometimes Jane. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. So it really brings structure to some chaos that we had. And, I don't think it's a must have, but I felt like the trajectory of our department, the time we just updated our 10-year plan. I was like, if I wait a couple of years, I'd have to update that again. Has it been a perfect process? No. I'm really excited. Our accreditors come the first weekend. This first phase of Dix Park opens up on June 6th. Our accreditors come on the 9th. So I'm like a glutton for punishment. I told staff, I was just like, well, let's rip the Band-Aid off and we'll just celebrate all summer long. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Very exciting times in Raleigh.
That's great.
All right. Rapid fire. Here we go. First question. I didn't intend on this, but you had mentioned it earlier. You talked about cooking. Yeah. And that's probably my number one way to decompress if I had to pick one. So what's your go-to meal? And not necessarily go-to, what do you cook in the three of us if we come out to Raleigh?
Well, here contextually, my mom has all sisters. They had all daughters. I am the youngest grandson. Wow. I was around, my mom is half Italian and half Syrian. Food is life in my family. So what was it? Soccer is life or whatever it was from Ted Lasso. Like food is life in my family. Let's see, go-to. So we went, I've been married 20 years. We went to Italy last year for our 20th wedding anniversary. And I came back and I just started cooking a whole bunch of Italian dishes. My mom says 5 to 7 times, then it'll be right. So I've cooked ossobuco 5 times. I would, if you guys would eat that. I think Shane would, based off of some of the comments.
I'll try it.
Yeah. So that I would cook that for you. So actually, my favorite genres would be, if that's what you call it, would be Italian and I would say Middle Eastern. So Lebanese and Syrian food.
Yeah, pastas are awesome too because you could do so much with it, right? Like there's just I don't know if you're a pasta guy or not, but if
Kind
it's
of,
okay,
kind of.
okay,
Yeah, I don't know how to make it just yet. I'm not that advanced. More of mine are. It's usually some type of protein, and I'm
okay,
making something around it. Yeah,
I
veal,
was
chicken, and so forth. Yeah,
Stanley Tucci's got a touring Italy series,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
was shocked at. I would have just thought everything was breads and pastas, but there are parts of Italy that are very protein rich, heavy,
Yeah.
and there are things that they're not, and then as you go down the boot or whatever of Italy, there's other things.
Yes.
It's very unique. As I said, YouTube is something I dive into, and there's something I just has started seeing more and more. There's a guy, Matt DeBella, that has a podcast called Three Simple Rules, and he's only got a couple episodes in. And I won't make you do all three because it seems unfair to have you come up with any on the spot. But his concept is everyone should have three simple rules for success and happiness. Like these are the things that I don't waver on. And I'm sure in some capacity you could probably think of all three, but do you have even one or two that you stick to that are your guideposts for decisions you make in your thought process?
I'm a people person organization. I won't turn my camera over, but there is a thing when you walk into my office that says culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, I love that.
And Mickey Fern, one of my mentors I talked about, I learned a lot from him from everybody has a journey path, right? Even the toughest part of my job is the personnel part because I'm the Grim Reaper at the end. You can go to your supervisor, you can go to your AD, but it's ultimately my decision whether you stay or work. So that second portion would definitely be just understand someone's walking in the office or they're a little bit grumpy. Everybody's got some baggage going on. So as I've gotten into this role, I have a deeper understanding. People can do stupid things and they can be held accountable, but there might be an underlying reason why they do. So I don't waver from getting to know and understanding people's value systems that got to the decision they make. That is one of the important things, most important things I talk about is what do they like as a person?
Steven, you mentioned Middle Eastern food, and I probably go to Raleigh once or twice a year. And I have never made a trip to Raleigh and not gone to Neo Monday. And I get my fresh
Yeah.
my fresh pita bread and olives, and usually a good local wrap from there that they have on other side. So I love that spot. And I'm
right.
gonna keep it with kind of like a food theme and ask a question that we haven't asked in a while that we actually used to ask this question, I feel like on season one almost every time. But if you're going out to dinner tomorrow night and you can pick any three people to take with you, who's at your dinner table?
I heard because I remember you asked this in season one, since I listened to that season. Let me think. They got to be Parks and Rec people?
No, don't have to.
No.
Let's see. You know who had an influence? I'll give you one person because we just updated a project and I saw her name and I sent her a message. 10 years ago, I worked with Barbara Heller on something. And early in my career, she was kind of like a coach. We updated our 10-year
Yeah.
plan. I was the project manager. We did our department values. And the first time I
I've
presented
seen you
with her,
present with her.
yeah, I didn't realize how big of a rock star she was.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I walk in, and I was like, what the hell is going
Or
on?
how funny
Yeah.
she is.
Yeah. She's like, I got a big draw. And I was just like, yeah, no kidding. There's like 200 people in this room. So I think
Yeah.
Barbara,
She is
let's,
very funny, by the way.
She's hilarious.
she is. Right now, I'm going to spur of the moment. It would be Rod Brendamore, the hockey coach for the Carolina Hurricanes. One, he went to Michigan State, so I got love for that. Played for the Canes, and now he's our coach, and he's a really nice guy. And I think him and Barbara's personality would be so flippin' different. It would be funny. And
Dead or alive.
dead or alive. Oh, that makes it even tougher.
Dan, this wasn't your question. This was
You can
my
bring him
question.
back up. It started out my question originally.
You know what? Let's see. I don't want to go sports. It'd probably be some type of comedian. Like if I'm having dinner, I don't want to talk politics or religion. We're going to be talking about stupid stuff. So it'll be some type of comedian. There's a new comedian, Nate Berdakis, I think his name is.
Ragazzi.
Bergazzi.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw him in there because we just watched his Netflix special. So
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd definitely be a great dinner partner right there. All right. So the guys don't know this. I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it as part of it because I think it's fascinating. So Mark Brandanowitz, city planner, I think that Steven came up with that, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's as close as it gets, right? It's someone who came from like this planning background and all that, right? Have you any relationship or connection with Mark Brandanowitz or the actor?
I don't have a relationship, but what I can say is about 10 years ago, some of us left to have a beverage across the street. And when we walked outside, there was sitting Paul Schneider. He
Boy,
went to the University of North Carolina. He had just came off his first season as Parks and Recreation, and it was a table of Parks and Rec people, and he just sat down, regular dude. And I told Tom it was like when Facebook was first taken off. It's like my first picture I ever posted on Facebook, and no one knew who it was, right? So, but yeah, he went to University of North Carolina. He claims he's like, yeah, I worked for Raleigh Parks. I don't believe him, but still, that was relevant because that was season
Cool.
one-ish, and so not a relationship, but I was able to meet him. Yeah.
I'd love to know the backstory because he floated off. They've never had him on any other like
Yeah.
reunion episodes, and when he's been asked of it, like he's been short, a little salty about it. I would love to know the backstory. I'd
Yeah,
watch an hour-long documentary on that.
there's something there. Yeah.
So you say gardening is one way you cut loose. In a big city like Raleigh, it's probably tough to feel like you ever get away, like at some point. But how do you find time to steal some moments here or there, whether it's vacation or even during the middle of the day,
Yeah.
where you reframe what you're doing and what you're going through, where you're not the grim reaper at the end of every conversation, and remember why you got into this field to begin with.
When I became director, the executive management coordinator, who's my assistant, she said the most important thing you're going to have to do is be relentless about your schedule, and you're going to have to let me manage it. She's like, you can override me. You're my boss. And she is extraordinary about setting blocks that'll say, do nothing, or this is your time. And not all the time. And a lot of times she'll catch me in a meeting. She's like, you weren't supposed to be in a meeting. So that is how I do it during the work week. We have a number of public squares downtown. So I throw on my earbuds and we'll walk to take a breather. I mentioned earlier, Monday, I'm going deep sea fishing. So I'm Monday and Tuesday, charter boat, Outer Banks. I do find the right mix at the right time. A lot of it revolves around council meetings. Every other week, the council meets. For decision making, they have work sessions on the opposite weeks. So a lot of my schedule revolves around when they take a break. They're off from basically July through August. So I will take a whole bunch of time then. And I practice what I preach to staff. I will tell them, you need to make sure you have time for yourself. And so I don't think it's anything like revolutionary, but definitely in the workplace, it is stepping out, walking around, and then home times, walking my dog, going out and doing something with my wife.
Guys, we haven't really ever heard that from anybody else. Like we when we ask that question, people they go to the beach, they go to the lake, they do something, they pour themselves wine, they work at a wine place, whatever. We've had different people say different things, but I think it is just as important to get that 5 minute break as it is that
Yes.
15-hour
Yes.
weekend break sometimes, just
Yeah.
to reset, reclock what's going on, and on your schedule.
Staff
Yeah,
know it's around 4 o'clock around here because I'm walking around. I'm just like done. I walk in, I'll pop in, like, how you doing? And they'll be like, oh yeah, you can tell it's 4 o'clock. Steven's out walking around talking to people.
Yeah, you got to build it in, and that's hard for people to, I think, get to that point where you can. But we have these schedules that we follow. It's easy to put a block in there. It's hard to follow that, right? And no, I'm with you. It's a great point.
Yeah, we have events every single weekend, and I try to make a commitment to go to at least one community event a month, maybe two.
Well, hey, I know we've talked about football, you and I, on a number of occasions. You talked about Michigan State. You just mentioned about the Hurricanes with their coach. Is there a sporting event that you've attended in the past that is most memorable? Because we've talked a lot about sports on this podcast as well.
Yeah, my dad will say, I love Steven, but he is a New York Mets fan because my dad is the biggest Yankees fan you ever met. And it's because I went when I was really young with my grandfather, and he bought me a whole bunch of New York Mets stuff and then came back. That is very memorable because that is the same year that they won the World Series, 1986. So
Okay.
I mean, there's a handful, but that one always sticks with me. I mean, I'm a Mets fans. We're miserable, right? We're good right now,
Not
but
right now. Yeah.
yeah,
That's right.
we'll
That's right.
fall apart come July. But probably Jay, it's that time I became a
That's
staunch
cool.
Mets fan. So yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, Stephen, we have taken up a little bit more time of yours than I expected to, and I appreciate that. And I had a couple other questions that I wanted to get into. That seems to happen with all of our guests. We could definitely go another round with you. I just wanted to thank you for the time, the
Thank you.
insight, and it was a really awesome conversation.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. I will hopefully see you all in Orlando.
Absolutely.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
All right, take care.
All
Thanks for
right,
being
you
on.
too. Thanks,
See ya.
Stephen. Bye bye. Man,
That was a great one.
He's got such a great story.
Yeah, he's
It's
awesome.
really fascinating, and we didn't talk about a lot of what we talked about the other day. He said just at the end, and I was like, oh, we didn't get there. They have events all the time, right? Their event culture is incredible, and to the amount of how many events they have, to the process that they have for having an ambassador program for it. Didn't get to go into that, but I went to a session in Atlanta from one of his team members that kind of runs this ambassador program, and they have countless volunteers to help with that, right? That they send out, that they sign up just because they want to be a part of the community and be a part of the events. And so that's just one of those topics that we didn't get to talk about, but there is a lot going on in Raleigh. I mean, it's an incredible city.
He's so polished.
Yes.
And anytime I've ever, and I did, I wouldn't say I know him very well, but we've seen each other a couple different times and have shaken hands, and he's so polished. What I love about this podcast, and I get the perspective of Hannah editing a lot, is when we have young professionals on there, I get excited about their energy and their belief that they can just climb every mountain. But Hannah does a lot of editing because there's a lot of pauses and them trying to think about, because you're not really asking them what they have done. You're asking them what they will do. You know what I mean? But when you talk to someone as seasoned as Stephen and Rosalind and the others that we've had over the years, those are real easy edits for Hannah because they've been through the fire. There's no there's no pauses, there's no.
It's all there, man. It's all up in his head.
It's just recall, and he was great to talk to, and it was just, I love talking to people that have been in this field at a high level for a long period of time, because he's a plug and play. Like, you could take him to New York, you could take him to Seattle or San Francisco or whatever large city in the Midwest, Chicago, and he would just do just as well. Like, he's really good at what he does. It's impressive.
I thoroughly enjoy every time I get to see him.
Yeah.
One, because I learn from him, but also I love hearing all the updates and progress that they're making in Raleigh, because they're just nonstop doing some amazing things. And like I mentioned earlier, I've been to Dix Park and I've been to some of their facilities, and they're all top notch. But there's always a new facility every time I go, because I only get out that way once or twice a year.
Raleigh cranks people out too. When you think of him and Kathy Capps and others that have worked in that department. I mean, the guy that was the New York City commissioner, wasn't he a keynote at one time at one of the NRPAs at one time, or he's been highlighted in one of the NRPA magazines, Mitchell Silver. And so it's like, that's a department that has got a lot of chops, for sure.
Yeah. I will say before we leave today, guys, that I always appreciate when I feel like I stole one off the board.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of them where
this
was one of them where I was like, I'm going to ask him, and he's going to maybe give me the runaround or do something.
Yeah.
When he committed, I was so happy to beat you all to the punch on that one for sure. So thank you again to Stephen, and guys, we are back, I believe, on the regular schedule next week as well.
Yeah, it's mine next week.
All right. Shane's
joining. More shenanigans.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on RecLess.
See ya.
See ya.
Follow RecLess Podcast on YouTube for more content and outtakes. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for news and exclusive clips. RecLess Podcast is edited and produced by Hannah Mize. Thanks for listening. See you next time.